So you've got a great idea, you're ready to launch your campaign, your product is popping, you think it's going to do well, getting ready to set up the campaign, and it asks you, what's your goal for the campaign? This can be a confusing question that a lot of people misunderstand. We're going to break it down and give you not one, but two goals that you should be setting up and how to go about doing that, why it's important. Let's dig in. When you're launching your campaign, whether it be Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or even another platform, they're going to ask you, what is your goal for your campaign? Now, typically this is described as how much money do you need to raise to actually make this thing happen? How much money do you need to develop, do the molds and tooling, logistics? What's your PPU or your price per unit? How many units are you going to be able to ship? What's your MOQ, your minimum order quantity? There's a lot of things that go into that number. The reality and the not much talked about, but becoming more and more common knowledge, is that the higher you set that goal, the less likely you're going to hit it in the first day, and the less likely you're going to activate the algorithms on those platforms that promote your campaign to users of the platforms. So really, the first goal, in my opinion, should always be as small as possible. $5,000, $10,000. I think 10 is a really good number. As a side note, there are going to be companies that only need to raise 10. I'm talking right now to the people that want to raise 6, 7 figures, even 8, shoot for the moon. You want to hit that funding goal as soon as possible, but ideally within the first 24 hours. By doing that, you're going to become a popular campaign on the platform, and you're going to get more traffic. More eyeballs equals more conversions. A conversation for another day perhaps, which equals more revenue, right? The bigger your campaign's going to get. So number one, set that goal on the platform as a little bit lower. You want to blast through the roof of that and start ramping up the momentum that your campaign has. Now, that is becoming, as I said, more and more common knowledge. That is something that more and more people are recommending you to do when you launch a campaign. But this second goal, I think, is the one that people aren't really talking about as much. Now, you can always cancel your campaign. Sure, you'll be out some of the charges in terms of your marketing partners or the prototype. But if things aren't going the way that you want them to, you can always cancel your campaign at any time before the end of the campaign. So that second goal is what we're going to call your internal goal, your team goal. What do you need to hit? You hit it, you got the momentum, great. But the reality is that you will probably need X amount of dollars to fulfill this project. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that X, right? I mentioned some earlier in the video: logistics, price per unit, MOQ, development, molds and tooling. But all of those things should be fairly easy for you to manage, for you to come up with numbers, right? As long as you're working with the right partners, those are all things that you should be able to have a pretty good grasp on pre-launch, plus or minus, let's call it 10%. Maybe it's 20, probably better to be safe. But I'm sitting here as CEO of Morpho. I've seen hundreds. At this point, it's probably thousands of crowdfunding campaigns launched. And the reality is, out of the successful campaigns, so many of them don't follow up with a real business. They deliver their campaign and they just run out of money. They have just enough money to deliver, just enough money, and campaigns are expensive. Anyone trying to launch a campaign to get a quick cash grab is out of their mind. The marketing expenses as a new, not trusted brand are real, right? It's going to cost you money to convert. The development charges are almost always underestimated from campaigns. They think that something's going to cost whatever their first quote was. Reality is, it comes in, it's way higher, and the first company they develop with don't do a good job, and they can't deliver shit. They can't deliver a product that doesn't reach what they sold it as on the campaign. So then they're back to the drawing board. They're back to new charges. They're back to new expenses incurred that they didn't expect. So by the end of the campaign and all the costs, by the time people are actually delivering the product that they promised, and it doesn't matter how much you raise, honestly. I mean, there's probably a certain point where if you raise over 7 figures, you probably have enough extra cash to trip up a few times and manage to still deliver and have a little bit of overage. But for the most part, 20K, 80K, 200K, 600K, a launch, a Kickstarter campaign is going to cost you essentially whatever you raise is going to go into building the company. Now, to add on another level of difficulty to this already difficult equation, you need money post-campaign. How are you going to pay for marketing? How are you going to pay to set up your e-com? How are you going to pay for inventory? These are all things that people don't really think about. Now, back in the day, you raised $1 million on Kickstarter. You've probably got 50 emails from investors in your inbox. It was a hot commodity to have $1 million campaign. Now, nobody cares. And the reason nobody cares is because so many of these companies don't end up doing anything with the momentum that we had. Here's in the corner, a link to a video about different companies and what happened to them as they saw growth. Having a product that people want, selling a lot on crowdfunding doesn't mean that much to investors anymore. If you have a great campaign, you might still be able to close a round of investment, but the reality is you're just not going to get the multiples that people used to get. So when all of that is the reality, you have to realize that not only do you have to deliver for the campaign, but you have to be able to grow the business post-campaign. The things that I said, build out your website. Do you have a team? Are you going to be doing all the work? Are you going to make any other hires? Your supply chain, while it may seem like you've tackled the most complicated issues with your campaign and delivering your campaign, it's only going to get more complicated. And you're going to need to either hire people to work at the company, or you're going to need to hire expert agencies, stuff like that, to help you manage the surplus in the supply chain efforts that are going to need to be focused on. So coming back to this second goal, it is subjective, right? It is very tough to come up with this number. Most people just aren't prepared. They don't think about it. Even if they've got as far as coming up with this internal goal, they're underprepared when it comes to knowing what the campaign will cost to deliver and what the campaign will cost post-campaign to build an actual business. Again, we're going to break it down into two different goals, right? The first goal is maximizing the algorithm on the platform. Come in low, lowball it. It's not really that relevant except for how it comes into play with traffic, eyeballs, having early success that will then bleed into the rest of the campaign and have a lot of influence on how well your campaign does as a whole. That's great. The second number is even more important. Don't get too attached to your idea. Don't get too deep to the point where you're starting to believe in a sunken cost fallacy, where you're saying, well, we spent this money on the video, we spent this money on the prototype, we spent this money on our ad spend. Let's just keep going. No. Do not do that. You're going to end up losing money. And if you're in a situation where you're losing money, is that really a business that you want to pursue anyways? Probably not. I gave a bunch of tips, but how to avoid that? First, don't underestimate your costs. If somebody's telling you it's going to cost X, don't come in and try to negotiate for an extra 10% cheaper. Come in prepared to spend 100% more because it just will happen. And this is not to cast shade on anybody that you'll potentially be working with. Business is a trial and error, always. You're always going to have problems that you don't account for. Manufacturing, shipping, marketing, you're going to have unexpected hiccups. And you might hit your goal and then find yourself without enough funds to actually deliver. That is a horrible feeling. Trust me, you want to avoid it. Second, there's the issue of scale. Smaller production runs are going to be more expensive. You're going to have to pay more per unit. Maybe you don't get as many units as you had hoped for, as that you had negotiated for with your supply chain. Maybe you end up having to deliver half of the expected quantity. Well, you still need to deliver. Because you're doing less units, your price per unit will probably go up. Secondly, for scale, as like a part B to this scale section, remember to think about post-campaign life. You're probably sitting there hoping you raise $400,000. Come 6 months from now, when you have that $400,000, you're going to realize it's not enough to actually scale the business. Build in more room for your post-campaign life so that you're not just delivering an amazing product and having a great Kickstarter campaign, but you actually are opening the door to future growth opportunities, and you're building a business that matters and has the longevity to turn into something cool. Also, keep in mind that when you aim higher, when you have that internal goal set higher, you're forced to market more aggressively. You're forced to engage your audience and create a sense of excitement. That effort often pays off in ways that go far beyond just hitting your funding target. So aim high. I'll do a throwback from the 40-year-old virgin. Aim high, Willis. Aim high. Set that internal goal higher than you think. You're going to need the cash, and you do not want to be strapped post-campaign. You have this amazing campaign, you raise a bunch of money, you have this potential to change your life with a new business. It's so exciting. Don't sell yourself short by not aiming high enough and shooting yourself in the ass when the campaign's over and you realize you have no funds left. Now, I'm not saying that you should calculate your costs and then 10x your funding goal for your personal goal. That would be lazy and unreasonable. The point is, account for every cost and then add a buffer. Now, the X in this equation is going to be how big is that buffer. That's going to depend on your specific situation. Get in, don't pull a number out of your ass, and definitely don't go looking at similar campaigns and think, yeah, that should do it. My advice, and take this with a grain of salt, double your costs. Whatever you think it's going to cost to fulfill this campaign, make your internal goal double that number. Keep in mind that crowdfunding isn't just about raising money. It's about validating your idea, building your community, and setting yourself up for long-term success. A crowdfunding campaign will be the first time the world sees your entry into the battlefield, your brand, your first impression to the world when it comes to what you're building. Don't get caught with your pants down. Build in the buffer. Have that first goal so that you blast through and maximize the efficiency with the algorithm, but also make sure you build that internal goal. Understand what things will cost to actually deliver. You'll be ahead of everybody else launching campaigns. Good luck. Questions, comments, concerns, hit me up in the comments. See you on the next one. Peace. Build in that buff. Sorry about that, everybody. However,